Flank First Draft. Presented by ABC Action News and the Tampa Bay Times continues.
And welcome back, everybody. I'm Tom Korun from ABC Action News, and joining us here from the Tampa Bay Times to my far right, Matt Baker, Tom Jones, and now there's Greg Auman and Rick Stroud. We kind of switched that around, I guess, but you know who these guys are. You read their columns every day in the Tampa Bay Times. The hot topic, obviously, is Jameis Winston. Let's look at it from a Buccaneers perspective. We had discussed this a little over a week ago, and this is something that I remember Lovie Smith saying when he took the job, is that he said, I've never really had a problem with a player, all right? But if I do have a problem with a player, I cut him. He's done. My question is, they are in a situation right now that if Jameis Winston were to untrack himself, they can't cut him. Oh, no. They're married to him. So where do you think that puts him? Do you think that Lovie thinks that he can handle any player, and then he is the one that may be precipitating this particular pick more so than anybody?
Well, I mean, I talked to Lovie a lot about this, and he sees himself in a role as a head coach, but more than that, as a mentor. I mean, he really believes there is some Father Flanagan to him. There's no question about that. Now, he's taken chances on players and given them extra chances when they messed up. Cedric Benson, a guy who came out of Texas with a lot of red flags, got in trouble again, finally was released by the Bears, first-round pick. Tank Johnson, you know, another guy had a lot of gun charges, kept them, got in trouble again. So
Brandon Marshall.
Yeah, Brandon Marshall, another guy. So, you know, look, I always say this. Don't get too caught up in the, you know, maybe in the image. I mean, you know, Tony Dungy had Warren Sapp. Okay? Yeah. So how do you rationalize that? You know, what are you – and look, I know Warren and I can say this, but like, he was as far from what Tony Dungy looked for in players as far as character goes as you could get. He's a polar opposite.
Without a doubt.
Now, that said, they lived in the same neighborhood. You know, it was, I mean, they made it work. And because I think Tony imparted on Sapp all the good that he could, and he kept them playing. The same might be true. At the end of the day, it is about winning football games.
It is about winning football games, but ultimately, I think for the Tampa Bay Bucs, it is an incredible leap of faith. And it's a phrase that Rick and I keep using on the radio show that we do, that you never know if there's going to be a 2 o'clock in the morning phone call. And when it does go off, your first instinct, if you're Jason Light or Lovie Smith, is like, oh no, what did he do? And you're going to think of Jameis, but until then, because you don't know what happened, because you don't know if this is maturity or immaturity, whatever, you have to take a gamble because you need that player.
But you do all your research.
Sure, you do.
Calculate.
Plus, we don't have our head in the sand not to think that NFL teams don't have their own patrol, so to speak.
They do the best they can.
Circumvents a lot of things that happen because Warren Sapp, if you look at it, I mean, there was a lot of clean time for him, but I'm quite sure during that time it wasn't clean. So,
well, it's a different NFL now, too.
Yeah,
don't forget
absolutely.
that.
We're in the post-Ray Rice,
Yes.
post-Greg Hardy, Adrian Peterson
Absolutely.
world, and things are different. But at the same time, if you lose, it doesn't matter. I didn't hear anybody calling in on the radio to you guys a show or writing into us at the Tampa Bay Times talking about all the great things the Bucs did for the community, all the turkeys they gave out on
2-14,
Thanksgiving.
man.
2-14. That's the only thing that matters.
Well,
Nothing else. 2-14.
Matt's exactly right, because when they were considering bringing in Greg Hardy, people would criticize us for saying, no, there's no way you can bring Greg Hardy into this team. So are you kidding me? We need a pass rusher. Joe McCoy was outwardly campaigning for and Joe McCoy's a good guy.
Yeah.
Campaigning for Greg Hardy. And if you go back, if we had video of what Greg Hardy did, the way that we had of Ray Rice, I think we would be sick into our stomach at what we saw. Yeah. And yet people out there want Greg Hardy.
Right. Well, and if people are wondering, you know, are the Glazers approving of this? If you look at the people that the Bucs have considered here in the last year, when you look at Incognito, you look at Hardy, these are guys they haven't signed. They're guys that they clearly were okay with, guys that they went far along with. You go back even before coaches, before general managers, this is a team that had Jeremy Stevens on roster. This is a team that had Aqib Talib. They've made it clear they are a forgiving team, and they're a team that will give second chances. So I don't think it's surprising that we're still here talking about Jameis Winston.
Are they going to be as forgiving, though, now because of the climate of the NFL? Do you think that now that things have started to come down on the league as a whole, that it's going to seep into the teams and they're not going to be as forgiving?
Well, it's kind of out of their hands, isn't it,
It's
Greg?
what the league says.
Yeah, I mean, to me, especially even with the climate of what's happened last year, we're almost a half hour into the draft show here, and all we've talked about is Jameis Winston, who's as radioactive a player as you might find in this draft.
But
So
does something like that scare teams away? I say no. And I'll tell you, and Greg Hardy's the example. The Dallas Cowboys are going to miss Greg Hardy for 10 games now.
It'll be reduced.
It'll get reduced down to 6 games or whatever. But if he comes back and helps that team win a division and gets them into the playoffs and helps them win a Super Bowl, at the end of it all, will they say it's worth it? Absolutely.
And not only will they say it's worth it, it's a one-year deal for Hardy. So
yeah.
somebody
Go make
else,
millions of
the
dollars.
Rams or the Colts, whoever it is,
We'll
they're
be
going to
back
pay
here
him.
next year saying, should they sign Greg Hardy?
Absolutely.
All right, let's talk about Jameis Winston, the football player. Let's put all his dirty laundry aside, because this is what the Buccaneers are going to draft. They're going to draft this kid as a football player. Matt, up there in Tallahassee, everybody had kudos about how he was able to lead a team and how he was able to generate other players to be better than what they were. Do you think that his personality is going to be able to walk right into the National Football League and be able to embrace some of these veterans, or do you think that they're going to look at him and kind of go, prove yourself, kid?
I think it's going to be more prove yourself, kid, but I would say that about absolutely any rookie. I mean, I aside from maybe like an Andrew Luck, I don't know anybody who's ever really stepped in as a rookie and kind of commanded things. But you asked a question a bit ago, what kind of a player is he? Is he worth it? And I want to know, which Jameis Winston are we talking about? Are we talking about the 2013 Jameis Winston? I've covered a decent amount of college football. I watched Sam Bradford play. I watched Colt McCoy play. Brandon Wheaton was a Heisman candidate for a while. Jameis Winston in 2013 was way better than all of them, and it's not even close. But Jameis Winston in 2014, only one guy in the country had more interceptions than him. Yes, his talent was depleted, but they're going to have 11, 12 guys get drafted this year, including a tight end, a receiver, one running back, some linemen. So I'm still trying to figure out, was 2013 an aberration? Was 2014 an aberration? Maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle.
See, that he brings up a great point, because as we know, the Buccaneers, they're not stocked to put a rookie quarterback behind that offensive line. I think he's going to run into the same problems, if not worse, than what he did at Florida State this past year.
Well, I wouldn't get too hung up on the interceptions. Look, if we're going to talk about interceptions in college, then you would never draft Matt Ryan, who threw a ton of them at Boston College. Dan Marino threw a ton of them at Pitt. Now, I'm not saying this guy's Dan Marino. Might be closer to Matt Ryan, actually, but you have to get into the tape, analyze what happened here, what did he see there, and yeah, he's got a gunslinger mentality. You're going to have to live with that. I think the bigger question will be, you're going to a Lovie Smith team. How much is this guy going to let him throw the ball? Are you going to build around a quarterback who likes to gun it, who's got, now the good thing about it is he has a short memory, right? He comes back. How many times did you see him throw 3 interceptions and then bring his team back? Because he just keeps firing. He's kind of a baller that way.
I could write a really good book with leads and stories that I wrote about FSU losing that just got blown up by
all
third
of them
quarter.
but one got blown up, and in the one game he lost, I actually thought he wasn't all that bad. But the other thing, when you talk about what kind of teammate he is and what's he gonna, every teammate, and Matt will tell you, it's like the Florida State players rave about him. His coaches rave about him. So that says a lot about what they think about him as a teammate and what they think about him as a leader. The question I have for him is, he's had no failure, really, in his career. What's it going to be like going to a team that, quite frankly, they might win 4 games or 5 games with him, even if he has a good year?
Yeah.
This team's still a ways away from being really successful. How will he handle?
And he hasn't failed.
After going 26-1 the last 2 years, how's he going to
For me, that's a big unknown, and it's that way whether it's Winston or Mariota, in that Winston went 26-0, didn't lose a game in college until his last game. He's going to lose 2 in the first month of his NFL career if he does well.
Yeah.
So when I look at those interceptions, when I look at all those first half deficits, that's the one thing I can point to that says he's handled adversity within a game. He's been down and bounced back. I don't think he's dealt with what he'll deal with as a rookie in terms of, again, if we think they do well, they'll still have a losing record. They'll be a 7-9 team.
Right.
He's got to handle that and still be a leader, which might not be an easy transition for him.
Is this a guy that you put out there in week 1?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Either quarterback.
What's your alternative? Mike Glennon? I mean, I'd rather let's start now. I mean, if you're going to start building something, let's start building it with this
So
guy.
if you're the
And
owners,
as far as
if you're the Glazers, then you're basically saying, okay, let's forget about the record right now. Let's get this kid in and go.
Well, no, you think he's going to help you win. He won 2
better than
games
Mike
last
Glennon.
year.
I think he's better equipped than Mike
Mike Glennon's
to win
5
football
and
games.
13.
You guys think he's better
5
equipped?
I don't like Mike Glennon. I don't like
You
Mike Glennon.
can't
I think he's
make
a
the
better
investment
player
you're
for sure.
making in a number 1 overall pick and not make it a priority to cultivate him and have him ready. Not even for year 1. You're making a 4-year investment in him.
Right.
And if you take
there's
some
the key.
lumps-
And Greg, you just hit on something because we hear all the time, like, well, you can't put him behind that offensive line. He's going to get killed. They'll never win. They should draft. They should trade a pick, get offensive
tackle
line.
first.
Let's do it that way. And I'll say, we're acting as if they're never, ever going to address the offensive line.
In fact, they're playing on last year's offensive line.
He's gonna be, it's not like he's gonna be here week 1 and then they're done with him. He's gonna be here for hopefully for 4, 5,
Right.
10 years. And by that point, you would hope over that time you would have an offensive line.
The example I was thinking of earlier is when the Colts drafted Peyton Manning, they made him the franchise quarterback and everything. I believe their first overall pick the next year, not number 1 overall in the draft, but their first round pick the next year was to Tarek Glenn, who is a cornerstone franchise perennial Pro Bowl left tackle who covered his blind side for pretty much his entire career in Indianapolis.
It's not a great example, but I think Paul Gruber might have come after Vinny Testaverde.
Right.
You
Sure.
know? I mean, Vinny didn't succeed here, but he did everywhere else.
Okay, we got a question here from Paul on Twitter. What happens to Glennon if a quarterback is drafted?
It's a tough decision, and they're not really. Right now, the Bucs keep saying Mike Glennon is a valuable asset. He's somebody they like. Now, the question they have to decide is once they've drafted Winston, once they've committed to him, how important is it to have a quality backup quarterback? Because if they can deal him, if they can get a 3rd-round pick for him in the draft, they can find a starter at another position. And then they can bring in just a veteran backup, a guy like a Jason Campbell or someone who will be there, again, in a backup capacity. But if Winston goes down, the team will take a hit. So they have to decide how important it is to have a strong backup. And if they do that, then Glennon will be there for him. But if they don't value that, I think the smart play is probably to trade him and get help somewhere else for it.
You know, what's funny about that is it would be nice for them if they did bring in a veteran, perhaps a journeyman backup quarterback there who could mentor the young guy. I don't know, like a Josh McCown kind of guy, right?
Yeah,
that's
but
the irony in all.
The problem is you're not going to pay that guy $5 million, and that was the problem with Josh McCown.
Now, you're the Glazers. This is something that I brought up, is that when you have a first-round pick like this and you invest in what you do, invest in this, you're the one that's going to have to live with it, because if it's a mistake, all right, you fire your coaches, you fire your GM.
Oh, yeah, they're
you're
all
still
fired.
living. You're still living with it.
Right.
All right. So, how strong do you believe that the Glazers are involved in this particular pick? Do they sit like they usually do on the side, kind of watch things, observe things, and then say, you made this pick?
Well, I mean, Rick can speak to it better than I can because he knows how the Glazers operate. But certainly they will sign off on the fact that they're going to draft Jameis Winston.
I would think they already have.
In terms of character, they want to make sure that they signed off on that aspect of it. But as far as making a mistake, well, you can look at it the other way too. What if they don't take him and he turns into Aaron Rodgers? Right. Now all of a sudden, now you've made a mistake there as well. Mm-hmm. I think they're going to trust Lovie Smith and Jay Slade.
Well, I think
with the football
look,
decision.
their management style has always been that, right? I mean, they're gonna ask really hard questions, Tom. I mean, I don't think that Lovie and Jason can come in there and say, hey, this is the guy we want. I mean, they're not okay. No, they're gonna want to know about what happened in Tallahassee, back in 2012. They're gonna want to know, is this guy going to continue to get into trouble? They're going to ask and you better have, from what I understand, and talking to people like Rich McKay and others, you better have the right answers. Because they're smart people. They didn't get to be billionaires because they make dumb decisions, right? So they will absolutely vet both these guys. And they've signed off on Mariota too, which is a much easier thing to do from a character standpoint. We haven't even talked about Marcus Mariota. This guy's going to go number 2 in the draft, and there are many people, and I think the Bucs probably had to look hard at him, that think he's going to be the better player. I've been amazed how we get closer to the draft where how Mariota's stock has suddenly just gone wild.
What's interesting right now is that our poll that we're doing, the latest update we have is Mariota leads 51 to 41%.
Sure, doesn't surprise me.
That's how divided the fan base is. The other thing that's an immediate consequence is when you make this pick, there's a good chance the other guy comes in and is in your building in week 1.
How about that?
All right, right away, immediate results. And if you don't win that game, that's a setback that you're going to have to overcome, and people are going to be talking about it after that game.
Well, I'll tell you what, when we come back, we're going to talk more about Marcus Mariota. Obviously, who knows, maybe the Buccaneers may freak us all out and pull the kid in from Hawaii. But remember, hit us up right now on Twitter, #ThePlank, and who do you think it is going to be? Tweet us now, #Mariota or #Winston. You can also take our poll on our website at abcactionnews.com and chime in below. on the live stream on our website. We will be back. The topic, Marcus Mariota.
You could be part of music's biggest night.